Hi, it's John Kelly. In this module, we are going to discuss Section 620, using the work of an auditor's expert. And as always, we want to be efficient and effective, follow professional standards, and document what we have done properly. Now, we actually find that there are three kinds of experts. And if we're going to use an expert, it's got to be in a field other than accounting and auditing, because the assumption is that the auditor should know everything there is to be known about accounting and auditing for their particular client. And the third kind of expert is management's expert, and that's discussed in Section 500, Paragraph 8. And the two kinds of experts that are discussed in 620 are the auditor's internal expert and the auditor's external expert, both discussed in the same paragraph. And the difference between the two is that the internal expert is going to be subject to firm quality control procedures, independence, objectivity, things like that, whereas the external expert will not be, and so the requirements have to consider those things for the external expert. Now, it's clear in the section that the auditor is solely responsible. There is no reference in the report to the use of an expert, unless perhaps you're qualifying the opinion. And the section also makes it clear that it's appropriate to use the work of an expert if you follow the requirements of the section. And in the context of when to use an expert, they draw a distinction between, for instance, expertise in accounting for financial instruments versus expertise in valuing them. So the auditor is supposed to have appropriate expertise in accounting for financial instruments, but may or may not have expertise in valuing them. And another example, the auditor should have expertise in deferred tax accounting versus expertise in tax law, which perhaps only a lawyer might have. And perhaps the lawyer is part of your firm because your firm has an extensive tax department that includes lawyers who are experts in tax law. And perhaps that person might become part of the audit team to help with determining deferred taxes. And some examples of when you might need an expertise in other than accounting and auditing. A client that had jewelry or art and you needed to value the jewelry or art while doing an inventory count. Actuarial math, you have a client that is an insurance company and you might need help from an actuary. You probably will need help from an actuary. You have a client that has oil and gas or mineral reserves. You might need help from a geologist to understand the oil and gas or mineral reserves. Now, probably most likely is that we will be using management's expert. Remember that it is management that is responsible for valuing all these things, oil and gas reserves, for instance. So they will have to have an appropriate level of expertise to do that, and we will then probably use management's expert because we're not supposed to be doing that ourselves and coming to our own conclusion. We are supposed to be auditing management's conclusion. So if we are using management's expert, that's in 500 paragraph 8, we would evaluate the competence, capability, and objectivity of the expert. We would develop an understanding of the work they had done, and we would evaluate the appropriateness of the expert's work as our evidence. And there are many factors to help us undertake those three tasks that we have to perform, and they're listed in the appendix to Section 500. My view is it's kind of hard to reduce this to a checklist. Having a list of yes or no answers sort of doesn't work here. You kind of have to evaluate each of the items listed and determine if they're relevant, and some will be and some won't be, and document a conclusion. So here you sort of have to write a little essay guided by the factors in the appendix as you evaluate using the work of management's expert. Now, if you conclude that you need your own expert, and again, there's an implication here that the auditor should not normally need one. 620A7 says, through experience or talking to other experienced auditors or through professional development, you should be able to acquire the necessary expertise to do the audit. So you would consider whether or not it's needed. There's some guidance in 620 paragraph 7. And you would consider factors about the nature, timing, and extent of procedures, the nature of the matter, the risks, quality control, matters like that. And of course, you would document it. You would document the competence, capability, and objectivity of the expert. You would understand their expertise and its adequacy, and you would agree with the expert in writing. And again, this is hard to reduce to a checklist, so similar to what I said about section 500, paragraph 8, kind of need to write a little essay following the guidance in the appendix to the section, and there's a lot of it. And then you would evaluate the adequacy of the work. You would consider the relevance and reasonableness of the work. You would consider the assumptions used. You would consider the source data, whether or not the source data had been audited. Again, very much like section 500, the guidance in the appendix. And there's lots of guidance again in the appendix to 620, and again, it's hard to reduce to a checklist. So in summary, it's not common that we use an expert. It is most likely that we will use management's expert, and documentation is going to be very important here, that we've documented what we did and how we considered the expert's work. So, thanks for listening.